Michael Williams is a Hong Kong University graduate and leading scholar of Chinese-Australian history. He is the author of Returning Home with Glory in Australia's Dictation Test, and has taught at Beijing Foreign Studies University, Peking University, and Western Sydney University. His digital project Chinese-Australian History in 88 Objects was shortlisted for the 2022 Premier's Digital History Prize. His recent book on the Robe Chinese walkers and his current project, Scattered Legacy, highlight his continuing contribution to the field. These podcasts are brought to you by ChideStudyPress, publisher of Chinese-Australian History.
Hi, and welcome to number 23 in ChideStudyPress's series on Chinese-Australian history. And today we're looking at the Tung Wah news. Not to be confused with the Tung Wah Times, a name change with a newspaper that continued on. But we're looking at just the Tung Wah news, which only was published very late in the 19th century, early 20th century, so from about 1898 to 1901. And there's a little bit of in-depth look at a few articles within that newspaper to give you an idea, or give us all an idea, of what constituted news and what was important to people living in Sydney among the Chinese community. As usual, I'm using our bots, friendly bots, to analyse the article and to discuss the Tung Wah news newspaper items. One thing they get wrong is they misunderstand 10,000 li, which was the original title of the paper that I wrote. Waiting 10,000 li was kind of an expression that just meant going a long distance. A li is, of course, much shorter than a mile or a kilometre, and so when they misinterpret that as kilometres and miles, they exaggerate the distance between Sydney and the Pearl River Delta. But just for your information's sake, it's about 7,000 kilometres, which I'm not too sure what that is in 10,000 li, but that was never meant to be an accurate estimation of distance. Otherwise, I think our bots do a very good job at explaining this in-depth look at one of a number of Chinese language newspapers that operated in Australia, mostly Sydney and Melbourne, published in Sydney and Melbourne at the end of the 19th, in the early 20th century. I hope you enjoy.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're opening a window into history that is, well, it's so rare it really changes how you think about the movement of people and money, especially around the turn of the 20th century.
It really does. We're getting into the Tung Wah News, or Yunna. It was a newspaper published right here in Sydney.
And for a really specific community, right, and only for a few years, from 1898 to 1901.
Exactly. And our mission today is pretty straightforward. We want to show you that this paper, it's so much more than just a historical footnote for Australia.
Okay.
It's one of the clearest voices we have from ordinary Chinese people living here right around Federation, a group that's often just erased from the official histories.
Or caricatured.
Or caricatured, absolutely. And it shows this intense, ongoing link they had with their home villages, mostly in the Pearl River Delta.
So we're not just talking about people who left China behind. We're talking about people living this kind of dual existence.
A true dual existence. Their fortunes in Sydney were directly tied to what was happening 10,000 miles away. That's, over 3,000 miles?
The connection is just...
Blah!
It's really eye-opening.
Well, to ground you in what they were actually worried about, just think about this snapshot of what was in the paper. To us, it might seem totally random.
Okay.
In one issue, there's a notice, an urgent one, asking for relatives to come forward and claim 45 pounds. It was left by a man who had tragically killed himself back in his village in China.
Wow. And then in that same paper,
in the very same issue, there's a report on the rising price of rice in Sheki, which was the main town in their home county.
And then you get the other side of it, the success stories. I saw one report about a ship leaving Sydney with only 17 people on it.
Just 17. And they were described as returning home with glory.
With glory, yeah. And those 17 people were carrying over 13,000 pounds in cash, in strong boxes.
Think about that number, 13,000 pounds at the turn of the century. That kind of money could change the fate of an entire village. It could buy land, pay off debts.
It could mean survival.
It was survival. So these things that seem so separate, a suicide, rice prices, a huge pile of cash, they were all deeply connected. They were matters of life and death. And the Tung Wah News was the thing that tied it all together.
It was like a transnational bulletin board, basically, connecting all those dots, which I think brings us right to the core value of this paper.
And that's its rarity. The thing is, We have so few sources from the Pearl River Delta about the lives of ordinary people from this time. So this Sydney paper is actually crucial for Chinese local history, too.
Not just Australian history.
Not at all. We're hearing from the farmer, the carpenter, the cook, not just the wealthy merchants.
And the words they use to describe themselves,
Mm-hmm.
that tells you a lot about their mindset.
Mm-hmm.
We often use the term sojourner or huakao,
Mm-hmm.
but the paper often called them travelers or lu. Why is that distinction so important?
It's a subtle difference, but it's a really powerful one. Traveler emphasizes the journey itself and, critically, the goal of returning.
So it's not about putting down new roots.
Exactly. It frames their whole life abroad as a mission, an economic mission, their real psychological investment, their loyalty. It was still with the village.
And their entire lifestyle was built around that mission. The paper wasn't just printing opinions, it was a practical guide for this life.
Absolutely. The practical stuff is everywhere. You see detailed shipping timetables, the exact prices for a ticket home.
Which you'd need if your whole life plan is that return trip.
Of course. And notices for collecting mail, which was their only link. And then, crucially, it reports on Guangdong grain prices.
That detail about grain prices is so important. If you're a market gardener in Sydney, sending your wages home, your family's relying on that money to buy rice. So if the price of rice suddenly spikes back home, your money buys less food. Your family's in danger, right then and there.
Their well-being was directly tied to commodities trading thousands of miles away.
And the wages they were sending, they were hard-won. A lot of them were working in the market gardens of New South Wales. And the paper has this fascinatingly specific advice for them.
Oh, we get an amazing glimpse into just the scale of it all. There was an appeal to form a Chinese Vegetable Growers Association, and it estimated 5,000 market gardeners in New South Wales.
5,000.
And about 2,000 of them just in Sydney. This wasn't a small-time thing. It was a major part of the local economy, all powered by these travelers.
And the advice they gave them really shows the kind of tight scrutiny they were under. It's so specific.
It really is. Things like, get a certificate for your horse.
A horse certificate?
Yeah, and not just in case it got lost. It was an official document to prove ownership, to fight off accusations, and you had to tie up your cart properly to avoid police fines. Don't ride an injured horse, another fine.
So they were constantly on guard.
Hyper-vigilant. They didn't have the same legal or cultural protections. They even gave advice on social etiquette. Simple things like don't smoke when you go into people's homes. Always managing how they were perceived.
And they needed economic advice, too.
Yeah.
Especially on leases.
They were told to get everything in writing. The land size, who pays the rates, the exact rent, and to insist that the tenant is not responsible for repairs.
Right. And if the land was uncultivated, they should try to get a rent-free period. It shows this incredible level of organization and risk management.
But not everyone made it. And that's the other story the paper tells. It was also a collection of these really tragic narratives, a reminder that this was a high-stakes gamble.
And that's really tough material to read. It must have been a constant warning to the readers that, this wasn't a guaranteed path to success.
Absolutely not. Think of Hung Mei, a carpenter. He worked for 20 years in Australia. 20 years. He goes home, and within a year, a swindler posing as a monk takes almost all his savings.
20 years of work, just gone.
Gone. And then there's the sheer desperation in the suicide reports. A paper bag maker in Brisbane, Lin Sinye, he killed himself after losing just 10 pounds. For him, that was total ruin.
10?
Yeah. Or Feng Yaping, who hanged himself after being sick for 2 years. The paper didn't sanitize any of this. It showed the immense pressure they were under.
And the stories capture the complexity of their lives here, too, with, mixed marriages and families. There's that harrowing account of an English wife of a market gardener.
I remember that one. After 12 years of marriage and giving birth to her 7th daughter.
7th daughter.
She kissed her children goodbye and shot herself. It's just devastating. And it really complicates that simple narrative of the temporary worker. These were entrenched, complex families.
And you also see things like appeals from a mother back in a village just looking for any news of her missing son, Chrome. But despite all these tragedies, that ultimate goal, the exit strategy, it was always returning home with honor.
And you can literally measure that honor with those gold boxes on the ships. The remittances were organized through merchant groups, like the Sydney Lin Yiktong, and the amounts were just staggering, from a few £100 up to that 13,000 pounds.
All of it heading straight for their families in the villages.
Right, and for those who were sick or had run out of money, there was a system for them too. The Linyik Tong arranged discount tickets on the ships.
But it wasn't a free-for-all. They were very careful about fraud.
Very. You needed 2 guarantors, and there was a 20-pound fine if you cheated the system, with a 10-pound reward for anyone who reported it.
That level of organization, it really speaks to their commitment to self-governance, to mutual support.
It does. And by 1901, the demand was so high that the merchants asked the shipping companies to set aside 1 in every 4 tickets for these discounted passages. That shows you how many people were relying on this community safety net just to get home.
And that focus on getting home, on getting the money home, it forces you to look at the other side of their life. The reason they left in the first place, the instability and corruption back in the Pearl River Delta.
Exactly. Why would you endure all that hardship in Sydney if things were safe and stable at home? They weren't. The late Qing dynasty was in chaos.
And you get this really conflicted view of the Qing government in the paper. Sometimes official intervention was actually a good thing.
Right, like when grain prices shot up, officials would sometimes ban exports to protect the local food supply, and people appreciated that.
But most of the time.
Most of the time, the officials were the problem. There was one essay that just bitterly complained about how hard it was to do business because officials were always demanding payments. Pay up or we'll destroy your goods.
And they were too scared to complain openly. The paper even used a saying for it. Magistrates would pick the fat one to sink his teeth into.
That says it all, doesn't it? The more successful you were in Australia, the bigger a target you became for some corrupt official back home.
And the corruption was everywhere. One of the biggest complaints was about unofficial tolls on the rivers.
Yes. They reported a toll of 20 taels at every single customs point on the water transport routes.
20 taels. Just to put that into perspective for you. A market gardener in Sydney might earn, maybe 10 to 20 shillings a week?
So paying that tax, that could take weeks, maybe months of backbreaking work in Sydney, just so your goods could move safely down a river back home. It was punitive.
And if you managed to pay the officials, you then had to deal with the bandits.
Constant insecurity. Bandits attacked the boats on the rivers all the time, sometimes right at the main jetty in Sheki. And they weren't just thieves, they ran extortion rackets.
It got so bad that the fish shops in the city had to close, right? Because their supply boats were being robbed blind.
Exactly. This wasn't just petty crime, it was disrupting the entire food economy.
But the villagers fought back.
Oh, they did. The reports show many were armed. We read about one couple, the Lus, who were killed by bandits even though they both had guns. But we also see villagers joining soldiers to attack bandit hideouts. In one battle, they killed 21 bandits and captured 9.
And it wasn't just organized bandits. There were also these desperate groups of wandering people, the Lumin.
So desperate that one group laid siege to the house of a former Hawaiian consul. And even after he gave them $20 in silver, they kept trying to get in.
And on top of all that, there was local violence. Village feuds.
Yeah, the paper reports on a feud between the Chen and Zheng families that went on for 20 days. Soldiers had to be called in. And there were wider feuds between whole groups of people, the Si and the Sanyu, fighting with swords and guns. It was chaos.
So you've got the hardship in Australia, the chaos back in the village. And then, this is where it gets really interesting, you realize this network was truly global. The Tung Wah News was an international paper.
It absolutely was. They were connecting fellow villagers wherever they were in the world. They had articles about Hawaii, for example.
What were they covering from there?
Things that directly affected the Chinese community. How they were treated during a plague scare in Honolulu, new taxes, changes to naturalization laws. The community in Sydney needed to know how their relatives were faring in other parts of the diaspora.
But the story that really shows their collective power comes from the United States, from San Diego.
Yes. This one is incredible. The local health authorities brought in a license fee of $1.05 for everybody that was exhumed.
Which was a direct attack on their burial practices.
It was. They saw it as a cruel grasping at the dead. But instead of paying this exploitative fee to reclaim the bones of their ancestors.
Which they needed to do to eventually send them back to China for burial.
Exactly. The community just refused to pay. As a group, they stored the bones themselves and hired a solicitor to fight the charge. It shows this amazing level of transnational organization and resistance.
So wrapping this all up, what does this mean for you, the listener?
Well, the Tung Wah News is just a priceless source because it finally lets us get away from relying on non-Chinese, colonial observers.
It gives us the unfiltered, intensely personal voice of the Chinese travelers themselves.
It's an unparalleled window into that dual existence they were living. It was a tightrope walk.
It really was. You're balancing the risk of a police fine for your horse cart in Sydney against the chaos of banditry and the price of rice back in your village. You're navigating this global landscape of opportunity, but also of deep discrimination. And I think the ultimate takeaway is just the astonishing level of organization and commitment it took to live that life. This detailed record of ordinary lives, from fighting attacks on ancestral bones to running their own discount travel schemes, it raises a question we should probably think about. In our world today, which is so hyper-connected, are there still specific community-run sources that capture that same dual identity, that capture the deep, practical, transnational concerns of modern migrant communities in such vivid personal detail?
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you very much to our friendly bots again for an interesting discussion and some insightful comments, which I always manage to get into, a little bit slight addition to the things that I've actually written. If you're interested, on the show notes there'll be a link to the original paper, Waiting 10,000 Li, which originally I did quite a number of years ago now, but I've still yet to get around to doing a proper examination of some of those Chinese language newspapers. There's fascinating information in them. Since that time, we've managed to publish a whole book, The Poison of Polygamy, that was serialised in a Melbourne newspaper at the beginning of the 20th century. There's very much more information to be found in these newspapers, and this insight into the Tung Wah news is just a small glimpse of that. As usual, this is brought to you by ChideStudyPress. Again, you can go and ask questions at ChideStudyPress@gmail.com, or you can link onto the website. You look at the publications, or ask any questions that you wish. And again, you can look at the previous podcasts. We're over 20 now, and certainly I've got a good many others lined up on a variety of topics, which I hope you'll tune into again. And that's goodbye for now, and enjoy your day.